If ancient Greece ruled the world today. Hey everyone, welcome back. Here at our channel, we like to play an entertaining game called What If? Today we are going to find out what the world would look like if the Greek people and culture took over the entire world. Would you live in a world where everyone speaks Greek? Let's find out. First things first, how powerful was ancient Greece? Well, when we think of Greece today, we think of ruined buildings and a few scattered islands with a population of around 11 million people. But don't let that fool you. Ancient Greece, especially during the classical age, was the birthplace of Western civilization. It may have been a collection of fragmented states, but their collective influence stretched across the Mediterranean and into the Middle East. From the powerful kingdoms of Athens, Sparta and Thebes to the merchants and philosophers of Ionia and the military might of Macedon under the reign of Philip II and his son Alexander the Great, Greek influence spread far and wide. By the way, Alexander the Great essentially conquered the known world, defeating the Persians in the east and reaching India and defeating the Egyptians to take control of their pharaohs. He even pillaged parts of Central Asia and was a true conqueror of the ancient world. So what if he conquered it all and somehow brought the entirety of Greece together under one banner? That's what we're going to explore today. What if the Greek world never stopped? What if ancient Greece had conquered the entire world? Let's get into it. What if they united and conquered? First off, I should say Alexander the Great was not Greek in the sense that most people understand it. He was Macedonian. However, since Macedon ended up controlling much of Greece and spreading Greek culture, language and ideas far and wide, it's fair to include him here. In fact, without Macedon conquering Greece and then spreading outwards, the classical Greek kingdoms might have continued being fragmented and never truly become a world power. As it was, Alexander sort of became the king of Greece, which is why it makes sense to use him as a jumping-off point to answer our question. And besides, Alexander wasn't even Greek. He was Macedonian, but he learned from his tutors, some of the greatest Greek philosophers and scholars, and would go on to found the famed Library of Alexandria. So Alexander is our guy. What if instead of dying at the ripe age of 32, he lived longer and created a Hellenic League? A collection of Greek city-states united by blood and purpose, intent on spreading their culture and ideals throughout the rest of the world. It's fun to think about. The great empires of antiquity would have probably fared worse against this kind of a league. China's Qin Shi Huang would likely have met his match against the combined forces of Athens and Sparta. Rome would have had a much harder time asserting dominance over the Mediterranean. And maybe the Carthaginians would have beaten them to the punch by forming an alliance with the Corinthians and Lacedaemonians. And who knows? Maybe Egypt would have held on to its Hellenistic culture and become a major power in the eastern Mediterranean. The point is, Alexander's empire would have easily rivaled that of Genghis Khan, and if he had lived longer and solidified the Hellenic League, it's possible that he could have conquered all of Asia Minor, North Africa, and even Italy. After all, the Romans themselves were big fans of Greek culture. So joining them would have been a natural step. With the Americas still inhabited by indigenous tribes and the Middle East still under the control of Persia, there would have been plenty of opportunities for Alexander's League to grow. Plus, they would have had the best navy in the world thanks to the sheer number of talented shipbuilders living in the Greek city-states. In fact, with a navy like that, they would have made their way to the Americas centuries before Christopher Columbus. The two Koreas would have easily traded with the Inca Empire and perhaps supplied them with olive oil and fish while receiving gold, silver, and exotic animals in return. The Aztecs would have joined the Hellenic League after a fierce battle between the Hoplites and the Jaguar warriors, but they would have been impressed by the superior Greek weapons and strategic genius. The same goes for the other tribes and nations that would eventually fall under the sway of the Hellenic League. What would the world look like if ancient Greece ruled? By 500 AD, the entire world speaks Greek. In fact, Greek would be mandatory. While there would be many dialects of the language, Everyone from Patagonia to Marathon would be able to communicate with each other, thanks to their shared tongue. Cities would look like the Greek cities of antiquity, with grand columns and marble buildings replacing modern skyscrapers. The only difference is that those marble structures would be high-tech buildings housing advanced technology, holograms, and AI systems that would make modern conveniences seem rudimentary by comparison. And yet, there would be no loss of beauty. Holographic statues would be crafted by master sculptors who would elevate the digital marble to new heights of perfection. And the air would be filled with the sound of harps and lyres played by robotic musicians whose repertoire would consist of the greatest compositions of Pindar and Sappho. Instead of having a renaissance, there would always be a classical revival. Greek art would never have gone out of style, and the museums of the world would be filled with original sculptures and paintings, as well as interactive displays detailing the lives of the greatest heroes and philosophers of antiquity. The only art form that would develop differently would be theater. Since tragedy and comedy never went out of fashion, they would simply continue to evolve alongside society, producing works that would make Shakespeare look derivative by comparison. Greek myths would also continue to be told, retold, and reinterpreted until they became a part of the cultural fabric of the world. And so the stories of Zeus and Hera, Poseidon and Hades, Ares and Aphrodite, Apollo and Artemis, Demeter and Persephone would be known by everyone, regardless of where they lived. Of course, the other gods would also be popular, including Anubis, Bastet and Ra from Egypt, Quetzalcoatl and Huitzilopochtli from Mesoamerica, and many others. But the Olympians would remain the most popular pantheon by far. But what would happen on the fields of battle? Warfare, strategy, and power. Greek warfare emphasized discipline, tactics, and unity, which is why the Macedonian phalanx was such a formidable force on the battlefield. What if they utilized this approach in a futuristic setting? The world's superpowers today are built on hoplite formations and navies modeled after the Athenian trireme. But what if the Greeks industrialized first? Futuristic tech designed in ancient styles would rule the day, such as high-tech shields equipped with built-in energy swords or drones bearing the laurel wreaths of victory. Advanced weapons and armor made of bronze and reinforced with magical enchantments would make ancient Greek warriors nearly invincible. Soldiers would be able to fly into battle on chariots powered by winged horses or storm the enemy on the backs of hippocamps, straight out of a Greek vase painting. And what's more, they would do all of this while wearing togas. Now, of course, this isn't exactly realistic. We can't seriously expect the Greeks to build spaceships and plasma rifles while wearing robes. But what if the Greeks managed to combine the best of both worlds, creating advanced technology that was both highly effective and aesthetically pleasing? What if they invented flying chariots that looked like Pegasus or energy swords that sparkled like the Medusa's head carried on the shield of Athena? The possibilities are really endless. But one thing is for sure, if ancient Greece had conquered the world today, we'd all be wielding some pretty fancy weapons. Okay, so let's say ancient Greece managed to conquer the world, somehow adopt modern technology, and yet never lose sight of their artistic and philosophical roots. How would everyday life look in this world? What would you wear? What would you eat? You'd wear comfortable yet elegant garments like tunics or chitons, maybe with some fancy belts or jewelry, depending on your status. Meals would consist of olives, fish, bread, and wine, with seasonal fruits and vegetables depending on where you live. Olive trees would be cultivated all over the world, and olive oil would be used not just as a cooking ingredient, but also as a moisturizer and fuel for oil lamps. Fish would be a staple of the diet, especially in coastal communities, and seafood markets would be a common sight in every town. Bread, of course, would be made from wheat and barley, and bakeries would be found in every corner of the globe. Wine, too, would be an important part of Greek cuisine, and vineyards would stretch as far as the eye could see. But wait, what about meat? Wouldn't the Greeks eat lamb or beef? Actually, they wouldn't. Meat would be considered a luxury item only eaten on special occasions, and most Greeks would be vegetarian, or at least mostly vegetarian. Festivals honoring Dionysus would fill your calendar, and you'd know more about the Iliad than any Marvel film. Life would be elegant, dramatic, philosophical, and very, very theatrical. Theater would be the primary form of entertainment, and actors would be revered as the highest form of artist. The Olympics would be taken even more seriously, and athletic competitions would be held not just in Greece, but all over the world. And there would be lots of red tape to get through to compete. Borders would be reimagined. The world would be divided into thousands of little city-states, each with their own unique dialect, government, and temple to the gods. Forget countries. You'd identify with your polis, your community square. The world would be both local and global at once. Imagine a world where you could speak Greek and be understood from Buenos Aires to Boston. A world where the art and philosophy of Greece permeated every aspect of life. A world where the greatest minds of the ancient and modern world came together to create something truly special. What if ancient Greece had conquered the world? What would it have looked like? How would it have changed the course of history? Unfortunately, we can only speculate. But one thing is for sure, it would have been an interesting world indeed. That's all for this video. Until next time, stay curious, stay creative, and remember, what if anything is possible? Don't forget to smash that like button and ring the bell for notifications. Thanks for watching.